Hi, and welcome to the Soul and Survival podcast with Grant and Louise Bentley. We have run the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy since 1995. We are both qualified practicing homeopaths, and Grant is also a naturopath. Together, we discovered a link between energy and facial structure based on traditional ideas from homeopathy that have roots going back 200 years. This project is called Homeopathic Facial Analysis, or HFA for short, and has been the cornerstone of clinical diagnosis and training courses since 1999. Between us, we have written and produced 7 HFA books, including Soul and Survival. Soul and Survival is the philosophy of energy influencing matter and how this energy forms individual facial structure, our unconscious drives and fears, our life patterns, and universal time cycles.
Hi again, everybody, to this next Soul and Survival podcast. Hi, Louise.
Hi, Grant. How are you today?
Not too bad. A little pooped after being on our property doing a lot of stuff, but...
Your garden is looking amazing.
Thank you.
Our garden, I should say.
Yeah,
but
it's ours.
It's your baby, though.
So, I popped just inside for you to give me a question, and we'll fly off the... What is it, off the seat of your pants or off the top of your head? Or
I don't know.
Which end is which?
Anyway, you're talking about spontaneous thinking? Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. What is my question? I always get these little ideas, and this is the one that's in my head because, every week I talk to a few different students that are coming to HFA, and not all of them, but quite a few of them have done some form of contemporary homeopathy. Some of them have done full courses or partway through courses. All of them, to some degree, are struggling a bit. They, can't find the remedy, not sure what to do, losing their confidence, or they've been in it for years and they sort of haven't quite got off the ground. Anyway, for whatever reason, they've found their way to HFA, which we're really happy with. My question to you is, if you're one of those people, and we were, so we know what it's like to be in that position, the only difference is we didn't have a HFA to step across to. We had to develop it. But just imagine we did, and you're making that transition from being that contemporary homeopath with, personality types, keynotes, and a bit of miasm and a bit of this and a bit of that, and you want to go back into this real classical model, which is miasm and totality, and you're going to use HFA as your process. What would your main transition tips be for those people?
Wow. Okay. I'm glad to hear you say go back into contemporary homeopathy, classical homeopathy, because in some ways I think the term classical homeopathy was hijacked a little bit in the 70s. And essentially what it's meant to mean is that it's meant to mean traditional, but it's a type of homeopathy that is not traditional. It's a post-Kentian homeopathy that I don't think Kent himself would have approved of, by the way. I actually don't. Because, you can take an idea so far, you extend the idea to the point where it really doesn't have any resemblance to the original idea.
And yet still call it the same thing.
And still call it the same thing. So what I mean by that is that the contemporary homeopathy, I think, is the contemporary homeopathy has taken Kent's idea. Well, Hahnemann's original idea that the mentals become important after the generals of the case have been repertorised on, and then sometimes, if case permits, then the mentals can be a deciding factor because they're a discriminating factor. The problem with the generals is that they're exactly that, they're general. So when you look at worse at night, I don't know, worse for sweets, they're big.
Burning pain, those sorts of things.
They're really big. And so as a result, you need some sort of discriminating factor, because you end up being left with around about 30 or so remedies, or 20 remedies. So you need some discriminating factor. And then Hahnemann sort of said, well, if it's present, then take the change of condition from, and he's talking about the mental emotional state here, the change of the disposition from normal to whatever it is in that sick person. Now, that's really important to highlight, that it is that change. It's not meaning, he didn't mean that your personality should be something that we repertorise on, because your personality isn't a problem. Might be a problem to other people, but it's not meant to be your problem. Kent then took that a little bit further, saying that it should be the primary factor. Now, I'm not making this up. You can tell that by Kent's repertory, right? I mean, it starts with the mentals, and the mentals are really extensive. Whereas if you look at Bonninghausen's repertory, yes, it does start with the mentals, because it's that hierarchical thing from above down. But all of his brain power went into the general states and sensations and so on. Whereas I don't know how much bigger in percentage, somebody will have done it. I mean, I think I've even heard it myself some stage, of how much more extensive Kent's mentals in his repertory are by comparison to Bonninghausen. So showing you the emphasis. And then it sort of became, from post-Kent, into this idea that you are the remedy. They're meant to be a hand and glove fit. And that in fact really the mentals or the personality of the case is all that you're meant to go on.
And so this is what people are learning in these contemporary homeopathy courses, right? This whole kind of personality is the remedy. I mean, we learnt it. We were taught the same thing, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely we were. And so already you can tell that we've moved a long way from what Hahnemann was saying, of do all the generals and all the PQRSs, and then if all things are still equal, then maybe use the changed disposition of the patient as a guide, right?
Yeah.
Not base it on this, not as to be, by the time it reached Kent's making it a foundation stone.
And there's a real difference too between change of emotional or mental state because of the stress of, whatever's happened and made you sick, to your personality.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's not meant to be that your personality is the problem, like what we were saying before. So, but when we talk about this term contemporary classical homeopathy, we really mean this post-Kentian, everything is about the nuances of personality.
And here's the thing, if you haven't already worked this out, those of you who have learned this, it's really hard, it's really subjective, and you get relatively low success rates.
The problem is when everyone claims high success rate, how do you measure one high against another?
And what is success?
This becomes really, really difficult, because there isn't an objective person, place, etc. to do that kind of measurement. So we're sort of relying on people's opinion of what success is, and sometimes that can be a little over-exaggerated. I think if you go by Herring's law too, that, if I don't see some change at a really fundamental, deep level, then I don't regard it as a success. So, we've often spoken about that sort of fork stream success rate, right? I mean, maybe you need to just enlighten what I mean by that, and so then I'll move on.
Well, we've seen lots of different styles of homeopathy over the years, And, really good meaning people who are embracing everything they've learned in the best way they can. But there was this one time when we saw this case that was quite a complex case. There was a lot of depression in it. There were quite a few aspects to it. And there were some really quirky keynotes in going through the remedies. And so a lot of homeopaths, when a patient tells them a quirky keynote, they kind of jump on it. So in this particular case, this male patient had, when he urinated, the stream forked. It split in two. And that is in a couple of remedies, and in particular in Thuya. And so that case was then given Thuya based on that one keynote, even though it had depression and a whole lot of other things. And in many ways, you could say a split in the stream of urine is sort of irrelevant, really. Like, it's not painful. It doesn't, doesn't
I remember
mean
they
anything.
had rheumatoid arthritis and they had suicidal depression.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, by comparison, it was sort of like insignificant. And anyway, they're given Thuya, and the homeopath was particularly pleased because when the patient came back, that forked stream was not there anymore. But the depression and the arthritis, all the other things had not changed. But they saw this in this sort of layered kind of approach that, oh, well, that's good, tick off that, now we'll go to the next thing. Whereas we know that it's holistic, therefore we have to find one remedy that sort of covers the case. And when we looked at that particular case, the facial features of that patient were clearly dominantly sore or yellow. Now, Thuya is a red remedy, so we kind of knew it wasn't going to do much. I mean, it was amazing it even changed the stream, but who cares? It didn't really matter. So that's what we've come to call forked stream homeopathy.
Yeah, it's our own little sort of in-joke, I suppose. I don't know whether in-joke is the right word.
It's not really all that funny, but it's sort of... It's erroneous.
Yeah. So, whereas what we expect from a remedy is that when we talk about a success rate, it wouldn't be a success rate if I didn't make some mental impact into the suicidal depression. That would be the number one that you want to see, because of course if they go ahead with it, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you die with a forked stream or you don't die with a fork. I mean, that's just completely irrelevant. And so unless it's hitting these deep core issues, then change in peripheral means exactly that. You've got a peripheral remedy. Right? And I don't want a peripheral remedy. I need a central remedy. And so, but this is where it becomes really difficult to understand from an outsider's point of view. It becomes really difficult to understand who is achieving what and how, because the shifting sands of what is success, like everything else in homeopathy, has a tendency to be a little individual and idiosyncratic. And so there's no baseline, really. And that becomes really difficult. But for HFA, the baseline is that those primary deep issues have to be affected. And if not, then you don't go on the lecture circuit. You find another remedy.
And yeah, the really interesting thing is that's what you're treating. That's the outcome you want to see. But it's not necessarily the rubric you may choose to find the remedy. And I think this is where people get confused too. They feel like the rubric has to be an exact representation. It has to be in the remedy, in the person. But the reality is 5 or 6 generals will point that remedy out more holistically than just focusing on an emotional state, even if it is as deep as suicidal depression. Okay, it's not that that's not deep, it's deep. And maybe you would use it as a rubric, but you don't have to, because if you get the 5 or so generals that are more body orientated, which means they're really objective, and the face, the miasm, you're in with a really good shot of getting a good remedy quite quickly.
You are. And it's again, I guess it's we've got to remind ourselves what a general is. And a general is your body's attempt to fight back from the circumstance or the illness that this patient in front of you is suffering from. So with every patient, you have the pathology of that patient, which is really just indicating how that patient is losing the fight. And then you've got the modalities of how that patient's body is trying to fight back. And then what we're doing with our remedy, and this is why it becomes really important, is that we are doubling up on those little telltale signs that are giving away the strengths and weaknesses of the patient, i.e. the modalities, to try and rebalance that, pathology affected patient. And it's absolutely vital to do it that way. And if you don't do it that way, going back to your original question, and all you're really trying to do is just, recount someone's biography in rubric terminology, then you're missing what's really important in the case. You're missing the fight back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You're focusing on the negativity of the case, perhaps, and the negativity of that person's response. But you're, as you said, you're not focusing on the positive. And in a way, you used to say this, and it was always a little hard to understand, but you're doubling up on the positive. Even though it can seem that a modality has nothing positive about it, it is the body's best attempt. And when you seem to give it the energy that matches that, it just goes whoosh. And it really starts to make a difference. And then, of course, the modality goes too, because it's not required anymore.
Yeah, and the modalities are all the better fors and the worse fors. The worse fors are more important than the better fors, because the worse fors are telling you where your body's weaknesses are. And now what you're trying to do, as we've said before, is build a bridge over those weak areas. So the distance between the trigger and the pathological response is greater, right? So it's giving you leeway. It's creating a buffer zone. And this is why Hahnemann was saying the PQRS, or the modalities, are all important, because they're all the stress areas of the chain. To then just disregard all of that and just smile like, Mother Earth Gaia, and just sort of say, so tell me how you feel about that. I mean, you're missing the point.
Yeah. Okay, I am going to take you back to the original question. You have definitely gone a long way into it. But from a very practical point of view, if someone is used to their clinical experience being this exploration of personality, this exploration of feelings, which is pleasant enough, but it's more what perhaps a counsellor might do rather than a homeopath, and it's not the same thing. What are the transition tips that help you to get back to your classical training and become a Hahnemannian with HFA homeopath?
All right. You almost have to, you're going to have to drop the ego part, because thinking that you can characterize and sum up a person by them telling you their favorite color, and suddenly you can extrapolate and know everything about that person is egocentric on the practitioner's part, not the patient.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And what you've got to do is do something that homeopaths have not done for a very long time, and that's become systematic and routine about their job. So at the moment, it's just a free-for-all based on your feelings and your gut feel and your intuition and all this kind of... It's not good enough, mate. It's just not good enough. I know people say it is, but it isn't. It isn't good enough. Homeopathy, if it's going to really be regarded as a science as such, which, is and I'm not going into that whole art versus science sort of stuff.
I think you did that earlier on.
It's been done a million times. But essentially, the science is the routine part of it, right? And you should follow a procedure. Everybody else has to follow a procedure in order to get what they want out of something. There are always laws and regulations, whether you're an accountant or a doctor or whatever it might be. There are just ways of doing things, and it's not a free-for-all. And we're just continuously going down this free-for-all thing, and I'm just not buying it, mate. I'm just not buying the fact that this works continuously.
So from a pragmatic point of view, you're saying drop the ego, which means you've got to drop even thinking you know the person in front of you.
And it's ego because what essentially you're saying is that you can talk at whatever level you want as a patient, and I'm going to sum you up and be able to know what went wrong, why it went wrong. And I just don't think really that... No, well, that's why I think it's egotistical, because you're just sort of making out that you're this godlike figure that's able to work it all out. Where what HFA is doing, if we stick with the godlike terminology, in fact, it's putting the God back into it. Because it's saying that nature or God has worked out the whole system beforehand, right? I mean, that's what modalities are. Like you said before, why on earth some of these modalities would be the body's strong point, how you can work that out, you don't. You just trust that it is.
Yeah.
And you trust that the body knows what it is doing to try and counteract whatever pathology is creeping and advancing in its way.
But at the same time, being aware that it needs help. I mean, we've always known medicine is required for certain situations.
Yes, but it's telling you what medicine. The modality, this is the beauty of it, right? It's telling you what it needs. The symptoms are telling you what's wrong, and I'm not saying they're irrelevant. They're there because they're your weak spots. So where the pathology is, the type of pathology that it is the weak areas of your body. So it needs to be included. But also too, how the body then goes about rebalancing that weak area and trying to reach a homeostasis. We know that the body always goes for homeostasis. We know that through blood sugar, blood gases. That's how the body works. It tries to restore balance. So what we're going to say, and this is why I say it's egotistical, mate, is because what I'm going to do is that I'm going to ignore all of the body practices that nature or God has put into place because I know better. I can do a better job. Human beings do this all the time. They always go, I can do better than God can do. But give me an example where it worked.
Yeah. And look, it's kind of similar to material models, isn't it? Which we're, as a profession, fairly condemning of that sort of authoritarian status that conventional medicine takes. So in a way, it's not that different. So it's really important to understand what is being presented in general objective terms. So would your main tip then be to let go of thinking you know and just take what is?
Absolutely. And this is what I do best. I come from a place of stupid unknowingness, right? So I take it that I know nothing with every person that comes along, and all I'm going to do is emptying my mind is one skill that I have. And so now you fill it with you. Tell me what's going on here. Hahnemann was so much smarter than me, it's not funny. So I'm not going to break his rules. And his rules are, really, God is so much smarter than me, says Hahnemann, so I'm not going to break his rules.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so it's this flow, and it really is. It's about giving up a little bit of this egotistical, artistic autonomy and going back to some basic routines that work. And be systematic about it. And so what is HFA? HFA isn't guesswork at all, right? So what is your favourite animal? All right, so your favourite animal's a seal and your favourite food is broccoli, and what you don't like is you don't like loud noises. Okay, so where does that leave me? Well, I'll tell you where it leaves you. It leaves you up the creek is where it leaves you. So what homeopathy, HFA version of homeopathy is that it's following exactly what Hahnemann said. It said, trust that nature knows what she's doing. Take the strengths and weaknesses, the pathology, the modalities, etc., but then we can take it one step further, and it's a system, right? So when we're talking about the miasm, when Hahnemann kind of got it right but didn't get it right. He just ran out of time. I mean, but I cut the guy so much slack considering that it went from nothing to something. And that's really something.
It does take time. I mean, he wrote the first Organon in 1810, the first edition, and I think chronic diseases he spent 12 years on, so he must have started that in 1816 till 1828. Kind of reminds me of HFA. Like, it took ages to get started, and we got some really good inroads, but, you know, we've been doing this now for 25 years, and you know, the first couple of years, I think we'd be a bit embarrassed now to go back to that, but it was still a good start. Like, it was okay. It got us on track. But the reality is once something's in place, that 25 years is all condensed. I'm really proud that we can teach that in 40 classes. 40 classes that are around 30, 20 to 40 minutes each, sort of average half an hour. That's like phenomenal, like incredible.
And that's because it's a system.
Yeah, and it's
right?
really straightforward, and you're just getting the core of it and off you go. And if you learn it properly and you keep repeating it, and you'll need to train your eye for the face for a little while, but 50% of the facial features are super obvious. Like a 10-year-old child could pick them. About the other 50% take a little bit of experience in that you need to look at a number of faces to make comparative, like particularly with size. You know, you can never say something's large or small until you've seen a lot of that particular feature, and it's clear to you that that particular face you're looking at, those eyes are really big or really small because you've looked at a lot of eyes, and on average those ones stand out. So some of those things take a little longer, but generally speaking, like, it's really straightforward. And I think even we, after 25 years, are kind of shocked at the simplicity of it and how profound it is at the same time.
Well, the simple's always profound. And I forget who said this, but, the truth is always simple and elegant. And it's reproducible, right?
Which is science.
And that's the one thing that, how can you reproduce artistic creativity? You can't. I mean, so this is why you need a system. This is why any profession, if it's going to develop, needs to understand the rules and and the application of it, right? Of its own profession, I mean.
Yeah.
So what we have is that Hahnemann laid down a whole lot of ground rules based on the natural observance that he saw that healthy versus unhealthy people had in common. And he realised how illness ends up progressing and how cure takes place. And so as a result of that, we have that Hahnemannian homeopathy. But he kept saying the key is the miasm. But he never really understood why the key was the miasm. He's a medical man, so what he says is that maybe then, this is my idea at the moment. My idea is that a miasm is something that is really deep and it's inherited and it knocks down the vital force, so you get sicker and sicker and sicker. But unless you address that fundamental layer, you're never going to find the right remedy to do its job. Now, that last part's actually the key. The first part was a mistake. But the last part's the key. You must find that fundamental same self sort of regulating energy. But how do you do that? I mean, you know, when we were talking about the modalities, etc., are the ways that the body is trying to fight back and harmonise. So there's no use then going into a pathological model trying to kill something that you might have inherited and peel that off, because it's contrary to what homeopathy is about. And that's why we've never been able to make the miasms work.
Because you've got to work with it, not against it.
No, that's right. Everything about homeopathy is about health promotion. It's not about disease fighting. It's about health promotion and making the constitution stronger. And he knew there was something central, but he didn't know how to apply it. Now, what we've ended up being able to do via HFA is that we've been able to stick with that same central model, but use it in the constructive way rather than the disease-destructive way.
Yep.
And the way that we do that is that every one of the miasmatic groups, if we stick with the more traditional names of Psora, psychosis, syphilis, psychosyphilis, so on. Each one of when you look at Psora, psychosis, and syphilis, what is it, right? So Psora pushes everything out. We know this via the remedies. What are psoric remedies? Psoric remedies are centrifugal remedies. What that means is that they take what is buried deep within and they try to push it to the surface. Well, why would they do that? Why would Psora do that as a miasm? If you've got to match up the energy and the action of it, why would Psora push everything to the surface? If its job is to destroy and destruct, why would it throw everything to the periphery? The reality is that it doesn't. Its job is not to destroy and destruct. The miasm's job is to protect. We've got it the wrong way round. So the miasm is just simply a homeopathic term for the way that the body is trying to rebalance and reharmonise itself. Right? So, and there are different ways. So if you take an infection, for example, you breathe in some sort of deadly virus that was going to kill everybody, like COVID, and it ended up not more than the flu. But that's another issue. The main one that we're dealing with, you breathe in something and you create this really volatile infectious state. So your body now is always about trying to protect the vital inner core. So the way that it does this is that in a psoric patient, it throws everything onto the periphery. So the main important parts of staying alive are left protected because everything's out on the outer boundary. So is that destructive or is that protective? Because that's a really big question to ask. So if your answer is, oh no, that's very destructive, well then back to the traditional model of the miasms you go. But if you say, well actually your body throwing everything to the surface to protect the vital inner core sounds a good idea. Well now you have to do a whole mind shift on what a miasm is. And that means rather than pretending that you're peeling it off or killing it and throwing it away in some way, you're actually working with it. Now you're getting back, now you're taking homeopathy to a deeper but still universally healing process. And this is essentially what Hahnemann was talking about, even though his conclusion was a little off. What he's talking about, because he gives the case of bronchitis. Remember that case of bronchitis that he talks about? He talks about how what I don't understand, and this is what led to the idea of chronic disease or the miasms, is that he talks about how I can successfully treat people with respiratory illnesses like bronchitis, and I can, with my remedies, and I can get them into a good place. But the next time that it starts raining, or the next winter when it's cold and wet, back into the same thing we go. There's a trigger somewhere that surface remedies, although helping, are not ameliorating in the sense that they're not taking away that deep core weakness. So even with statements like that, what you're hearing from Hahnemann is that I wish there was some way we could find out what that initial weak trigger of the body is and strengthen it. Now that's somehow got all kind of humpback and twisted and turned into pathological genetic layers that need to be removed. But essentially, when he's writing chronic diseases, his goal is the same as any other remedy, and that goal is to strengthen the body. Now, we know that the signs and symptoms, and particularly the modalities, are the way that the body is going about setting up that healing process. But protecting the vital inner core and that person, that sufferer, there's a way that you protect that core, right? And so we spoke about Sora of pushing everything to the circumference, and we see that in remedies like sulfur, which is really, as they call it, that prince of antipsychotics. But you see this too with a lot of pulsatilla. Pulsatilla has so much skin affections. It pushes all the emotions out through weepiness, tears, the whole thing. Just get it out of the system. Then you have psychosis, which is the exact opposite, because psychosis is sort of saying, okay, well, not everybody should, because human beings are born survivors, right? So not everybody should share the same protective mechanism like Sora and push it out for two reasons. One, we face different stressors throughout the world. Some are environmental, some are food, some are emotional, but we face different stressors. So we need, if we're going to hedge our bets on humanity's survival, we need to have different, we need to have different mechanisms of protection, because otherwise, if something figures out the way that we protect ourselves and overcomes it, the whole lot's gone.
So it's that diversity.
Diversity is the strength for all creatures, including us. So we try and be diverse in the way that we protect ourselves. And so we have something like psychosis that says that it's going to protect the vital inner core by imprisoning or, limiting to a very small and as inconsequential as possible area of the body and walling it off so it stops the metastasis, the spread of this, so it can't reach that vital inner core. And then people will then jump up and down, though, because we've lectured in this. And then the next thing that they do is, how can syphilis possibly be good for your health? First of all, we're not talking about syphilis, right? We're talking about a miasm that was erroneously named syphilitic. But essentially what it means is that it means an conservation of energy to withstand anything that comes your way. And it conserves. So the exact opposite to Sora, it brings energy in. So the vital organs are always surrounded by this energy. So what's so good about that? Well, it conserves. If you're going to throw everything out to the surface, you want to have pretty good vital force, because that is really energy expensive. Conserving and withdrawing energy is not energy expensive.
So they're all different, but they all have their benefits in their own separate ways.
Absolutely it is. But here's the key, is that HFA tells you what the miasm is, what direction of cure this person needs.
Yeah, via facial structure.
Via facial structure before we even give the remedy. So if we do a repertorization and this person is blue - syphilitic - inward motion, whichever one you want to call it, there's no use giving sulphurs, even though sulphur might be the most highly repertorized. And it might be followed by lycopodia and then thuya and then sepia. And none of those top four are even going to be of consideration because they don't belong to inward motion. Inward motion and conservation of energy is how this person survives stress. So you need to work with that. So you need the next, maybe the fifth or sixth one down might be Mercury or Aurum, and you just go, bang, that's the one we want.
That's one you want to start with. So, in a summary, going back to the original question, the transition tips should include the fact that you're working with what is there in the patient, you're working in a constructive way, and your aim is to strengthen them via a remedy that matches totality and facial structure, which matches miasm, essentially.
That's right. Yeah. And to go back to traditional homeopathy and to move away from what has been a hijacked version of it.
Yep. Sounds reasonable.
And I guess, to drop this sort of, it starts off as, I think, egocentric, but then it ends up being an incredible weight on people. The responsibility that, this person's health belongs to you being able to pick up some almost translucent nuance of character. And it isn't like that at all. HFA is not like that. HFA just sits down and it says, okay, I know exactly what to do. And if it doesn't work, then I do the process again. So when I get somebody wrong, then what I do now is that I go right back to the drawing board and I do the face again to make sure I've got that right. Because if you've got that wrong, you're wrong the whole way through. But so what it is that the body's trying to protect itself. It's trying to protect the vital inner core by doing something. That something is the miasm. So now, if you get the face right, you've already got that something. Now what you've got to do is figure out how the body's trying to do that. Well, that's your signs and symptoms and modalities, right? So now you can see how it combines but it's a process.
Yep, and it's a great process. So hopefully we are inspiring more people to take it on so that homeopathy can continue to do the good that it is capable of, and we can flourish as a profession with what we get is quite a lot of referrals, very busy, and that's the way it should be for all of us.
Well, it should be. It should be, and let's hope that it becomes a little more popular because the world does need it. The problem with health at the moment is that it's so confusing for so many people. They're obese, they're taking lots of pills, it's a world of trickery and short-term gain and a little bit of pain relief. But homeopathy's not really in the business of disease. You got to get out of that model. You got to get into it. This is the idea of we are health promoters. We're not disease fighters. So people might be coming to us in a disease state, but what our job is that it's to get you back up on your feet and to make your body as strong as what it possibly can be. That's the role. But it's dropping the artistic idiosyncrasy of trying to find little loopholes and linking them together in some sort of really spurious red thread. It's not like that. This HFA is for people that want their feet on the ground. Their job is to get that person back to health, and they know that if they follow these instructions and they follow this routine, you will get a result.
Sounds great.
All right, we finished there?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I'm going back to my garden.
Sounds good.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Soul and Survival. If you are interested in more information, books, courses, consultations, learning more about facial analysis or life themes, please visit our college site, Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org.